Hello, everyone, and welcome to the February edition of the French Cinémathèque, a collaboration between the Alliance Française and Telescope Film. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Justine Barda, and I'm the founder and CEO of TelescopeFilm.com, a website for international film and TV. We offer a database of over 500,000 international films and series with links to where to watch them in the US. We also have a dedicated page on the site for French film and TV with information about what's new and what's popular from France, as well as some curated selections. We are delighted to be collaborating with AFUSA, the largest Alliance Française network in the world, helping 25,000 learners of French each year learn French, live French, and love French. Here's a short video. We will put links to more information about both AFUSA and Telescope Film in the chat in just a moment here. The French Cinémathèque takes place the fourth Monday of every month, so our next meeting will be on Monday, March 24th. We'll be talking about the film Happening, directed by Audrey Diwan. An adaptation of Annie Ernaux's eponymous novel. Happening is a story of Anne, a bright college student whose life is changed by an unexpected pregnancy. Living in 1960s France, where abortion was still illegal, Anne must take matters into her own hands. But our film for today is The Count of Monte Cristo. Before we get started, just a couple of brief housekeeping notes. Please keep yourself muted when you're not speaking and stay on speaker view. To ask a question, please raise your hand using the Zoom feature at the bottom of your screen in the reactions section, or you can always put your question in the. If there are technical issues, you may want to leave the Zoom, then sign back in after a couple of minutes using the original Zoom link. This event is being recorded for our YouTube channels, and the total runtime is 1 hour. And with that, I'm going to hand you over to our fearless facilitator, who is also the chief film critic for Variety, Peter Debruge. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you so much, Justine, and welcome to all of our participants. This is a really exciting one. I think this is a film that really is a breakthrough for France, as it's the they don't make them like they used to sort of film. Hollywood has kind of abandoned this kind of sweeping romantic adventure storytelling, and it's very new to France. For those of you who've kind of been following along with mainstream French releases, maybe from afar, this film was kind of greenlit on the back of the two-part Dumas adaptation of the Three Musketeers that came out the year prior, and the screenwriters of that film, are the directors here. It's Mathieu Delaporte and Alexandre de la Patellière. Their film, The Count of Monte Cristo, instead of being kind of broken into two parts, is quite ambitiously told over the course of 3 hours, and in a very different style, I think, from the Three Musketeers. I'm not sure how many of you may have seen that. Did you, by any chance, do the Three Musketeers in this group? I don't think so, because of the way it was in two pieces. But that film was done very flamboyantly, kind of with a kind of grubby, muddy style, trying to be realistic and quite flashy at the same time. So you had all these sword fights told in long single takes, and a very starry cast. Here with The Count of Monte Cristo, I think you see the screenwriters of that film showing us what they would like to see as the style in which to tell these stories. And so we get something that's much more classical that's robust and bright and a little bit like an homage to the Cinéma de Papa of which was the sort of derogatory nickname that the French New Wave gave to the costume dramas and period pieces that were so popular in France before movies like Breathless and The 400 Blows shook things up. This film premiered at the Cannes Film Festival last year. It was saved until the very end of the festival, and a lot of the critics kind of missed it or had headed home before it premiered. But that was really the launching pad for what became a massive blockbuster in France, and really outperforming what the Three Musketeers movies had done. And it has since been nominated for 14 César Awards. The Césars, of course, are the national awards of France, the Film Academy. They will be decided on the 28th, so just this coming weekend. And we'll see how Count of Monte Cristo fares against Emilia Perez, of course, the movie that France chose to submit for the Oscar. But it was really down to these two films. And if you've seen both of them now, you can probably imagine what a tough decision that was, because they almost couldn't be more different, and yet both are, quite virtuosic accomplishments for French cinema. But so there's a lot that we can kind of dig into with this movie. But one thing the thing that I find really interesting is that we just don't see French movies like this, and I think it might be fun to kind of like unpack a little bit why that is, and to speculate about whether this could be, the success of the movie might actually allow other films to be greenlit. The producer of this film, and also of the Three Musketeers two-parter, Dimitri Rassam, has kind of like been busily greenlighting other kind of classic French works based on this one. But let's just sort of like take a temperature. The way we like to do this, is by involving as many of you in the conversation as possible. Let's look for maybe a few people who had strong reactions one way or the other to the film. Maybe you flipped for it, maybe you have read the novel 17 times and can't believe that they made this or that change, but who's courageous enough to sort of like throw in a reaction out there, and we can kind of build on that. Uh-oh, Jocelyn, do you want to tell us why you didn't like it? I see you giggling with your thumb down. I'm interested to hear kind of all types of reactions. Go ahead.
Bonjour tout le monde. I love these books. And I feel that France tipped to Disneyland on this film and missed an amazing voyage of introspection and conscience. And I think I just need to write this next screenplay. No, really, seriously, the books are fabulous. It is and I won't talk too much longer. These books present such a crisis of conscience and learning, and the story is nothing without that. And I think that while my heart soared with the magnificence of the shots and the costumes, those things were done at the expense of the real message of the story. So I'll end with that.
Yeah, I think that's it's a fair criticism. I do think that message is there, but it's kind of downplayed in favor of the kind of I would say one thing that I've found really encouraging about this is there was a time not so long ago, my generation and older, where if you grew up in France, you read these books. It was, just a part of the curriculum. And that is not the case still in France, I don't think. And this film has connected with young audiences, which is an increasingly hard thing to do these days. I mean, they're just not going to cinemas. They're not watching things longer than 30 seconds, much less a 3-hour movie. And to see the kind of way that this has maybe ignited curiosity. So I often think it's not enough for a movie to do this, but like if a movie makes me want to go and read the book or makes someone else want to go and read the book, that's already, I think, a kind of victory. So it doesn't, I think your point is entirely valid, but the glass semi-full there is, I think it hopefully will drive people to discover the book. So here, I've got some hands raised. I'm going to go with the one that's right in front of my screen, and we'll try and get to everyone. Jeanette Bales. If you unmute and tell us your thoughts, Jeanette.
Yes, I just wanted to react, which is to say that I completely agree with Jocelyn. I haven't read the books in a long time, but when I was much younger, I did, and I read The Three Musketeers. And of course, Dumas is very romantic, right? He's a romantic writer. And so I understand why the French critics embraced the film for reasons that you've already mentioned. The kind of return to spectacle in a way that hasn't been done perhaps in a while. And also the connecting with the young audience that's not really familiar with that part of the French heritage. So I can really understand that reaction, but at the same time, for me, it was a return to the tradition of quality, that cinematic current that preceded, well, it started, in the 50s, 40s, 50s, as a response to being flooded by Hollywood films. And I felt as if the film was long, but it also spent time, the action was kind of slowed down in a way. The film was slow for me. And if they could have taken the time that they, in my opinion, kind of wasted a little bit and actually focused on the psychology of the characters and on this moral struggle, the film would have been so much better. And I think the overall message, this overall theme of the conflict that you find within the character, of the conflict between getting revenge and actually being able to overcome that negative feeling that just winds up destroying the person who feels it. That would have been, I think it would have made the film so much better. Not to go on and on.
That all I feel like tracks. I do think that this theme of course, it's satisfying probably to a modern audience to see the revenge taken, but the point of the novel is the coming around to realizing the cost of that, and kind of curing himself of that impulse, which is, it's interesting. The story is often told over more than 3 hours, and it's been done as a 2-part film before, a mini series with. It's funny to think that Gerard Depardieu, played this character who, it's a little hard to believe, might have spent several years on a kind of starving in a remote island, but still, it's Depardieu. We all love him, but those versions have really taken their time, and they can kind of get into some of these themes. But Clay, I see you with your hand up. Do you want to share your response?
Yes, for some people like me, the Comte de Monte-Cristo is sort of like a Bible when you think of your. I first first read it in an English version before I knew a word of French, and then I read an abridged version in French, and then I read all of Dumas and in French, and um, I also taught an abridged version, which was called The Story of Vengeance or of Revenge, and I, I mean, for me and others like me, it's a little bit like the Bible. Um, and if you change it, it's a little bit like sacrilege. And the people responsible for that, who left out or who changed something, deserve to be burnt at the stake. However, I loved it. Wanted it to be 6 hours long. And even with the obvious omissions and changes, I loved it. The main character couldn't have been better. The main actor couldn't have been better. And the others were fabulous. I was really sad when it came to the end. And that's, I wanted to go on for another 6 hours. So thank you for working.
It sounds like like it might be overstating it, but like as a scholar of the Count of Monte Cristo, what did you miss most? Like is there a detail or an allusion or a...
Well, the sorts of the.
Oh, sorry, Clay. Did you?
I guess I'm frozen. Well, for example, is going to the Ile. There's a whole part left out where he goes on to a sort of rather shaky boat, and they're impressed with his navigation skills, and they. I'm old, so perhaps I've forgotten how he gets to the island and how he gets away. It's that part was left out. Also, I don't think it was a little dodgy about the evils visited upon him, but it's like when you're in love, you don't say, if only her nose were a little bit shorter. And I really don't like her ankles.
I'm glad to hear that as someone who is a great admirer of the novel, that you can kind of hold both things in, a hand. And it's like, this is, I think,
well, thank you.
It's that story, but it's also its own version of it. Okay, Ben, I see you with your hand up.
Yeah, I don't have a camera. So like many other people, like I've read the book 6 or 7 times. I've seen every version of the movie of it as a movie. I even like the Depardieu one because they cover so much, and it's interesting to see what each director chooses to focus on and chooses to leave out. I would have preferred to see more of his discovery in prison and his they just jumped right to understanding what had happened, and you don't see the torment. You don't see him learning and discovering why he's there, what's happened to him there. It seemed like everybody knew where the treasure was. They just didn't go for it because it was in an actual crypt, as opposed to digging it and finding it, and something like, it was, I did like what the twist they put on, that it was the history of what the treasure was, and I thought that was interesting. Balancing the good of what Lord Wilmore was trying to do, as opposed to the revenge, recognizing and rewarding what was good and done in good faith for him while he was gone, and then him trying to balance out what the evil, him trying to get revenge. And quite frankly, I like the story of revenge. I like the story of him getting even. and the ultimate torment in the end of what it means to his soul. But I like the story of the calculation and the plotting and all that. And sometimes evil does have to, or bad thoughts do have to win. So, my comment to my text back to my wife was, I love the book and the story so much. If I hadn't read this, I would have thought this was a fantastic movie. But because I'm so in love with the book, and I've seen so many different versions, I see too many gaps in it that make me question it. But it was a beautiful movie.
I wonder if you guys kind of agree with my kind of reductive take on one thing that I think the directors are doing, which is I think that they're trying to present this almost like a superhero story. It's like this is Batman. This is the Batman hidden in French literature. And trying to maybe excite a young generation of potential reader, or just kind of oblivious to the past artworks from the country, to like what would be an exciting way to engage them. And it seems like leaning into this idea of his wealth and the disguises. Go ahead.
I think to understand a little bit more of what the revenge was all about was to see the impact on him, the torture on him. We got very little of that to see his pain. Yes, okay, lost 14 years of his life in prison, and then automatically jumped into what he's going to do. Didn't go to the intermediate aisle afterwards, as Clay had mentioned. How did he get from one place to the other? He just automatically, it was too little spent on what his torment was. And he went right. It was like he went into prison.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's fair. The from a film critic's point of view, I remember just being impressed by just how economical they are. Now there are sacrifices. Like for instance, when we jump into prison and see Nine, there's that kind of trick shot where you've got a body double who's like emaciated, and it pans up to the ceiling and then back down, and Nine is like taking the place to kind of convince us that he's lost all this weight, which he probably never did. But then I think the very next shot is the Abbe Ferret punching through the wall, right? So we were like 4 years into his captivity already, and already he's being kind of liberated. But it's part of the the strategy of the movie to really keep this thing trucking along, But let's see, let's get some other points of view. Adele, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually really love the movie. I hadn't read the book in my time studying French literature, which is I find now hilarious, hearing everybody's comments about its Bible status, and so I want to go back and read it. But yeah, I really liked it. It reminded me of a simplified cartoon meant to teach big lessons in a way that's palatable to many, and I got sucked into the seduction of the revenge, and watching myself get sucked in and like, whoa, how is that applicable to me in my life right now and past and including my past. And yeah, like I definitely hear what the other people are saying and agree. Like it wasn't super sophisticated, but I actually think that especially right now in the world, that maybe that was a strength, and there can be another rendition made in the future. But that this idea of like, I don't know who says it originally, but resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It was like so big.
Yeah.
Yes, that was great. The only other thing I'll add is really, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm just trying to, can we make Ben's screen go away? But whoever,
I'm gonna have to sign out. I can't get out of there. So
I think it's okay, Ben. Sorry, go ahead, Adele.
The other, and I started Googling about it afterwards. So I'm like, how have I not known about this? Have not read this book, So I started learning more about it, and then I learned that heyday in the book ends up with the Count. And I was actually really, really happy that they changed that part of the story, because there's a long history of young women being married off to older men, and that being totally normal. And I just feel like maybe it was like a nod to things changing culturally, in
That
terms
is
of the
one of the
status of
big
women.
changes, and it's interesting because these works are really cornerstones of various cultures, and everybody kind of knows them by heart, and maybe we accept or don't question things, and it seems like they're modest but kind of crucial changes, I think, to kind of like keep this kind of more just in line with maybe contemporary values, but like the to Jocelyn's point, you said the kind of Disneyfication of this, the or Disneylandification, but like I do think it's kind of like it's this is the French Pirates of the Caribbean in a way.
Yes.
It's like they've really taken that spirit, I think, in this interpretation, and I think that they probably recognize and respect that other versions of this have been told. Dozens of them have been told, but I think it's been more than 20 years since the previous big screen adaptation. So while, in early silent cinema, you had versions of this being made every couple of years, it really has slowed down in recent time. And so it's like, the book continues to exist. Those other versions continue to exist. There's a version with Louis Jourdan that's quite spectacular as well, and a little bit hard to find, but I think it might be on Prime Video. Actually, Telescope, the kind of service that we use to find a lot of these foreign films, might be the great way to find that Louis Jourdan version. But so it's like, it doesn't cancel out the novel. It doesn't cancel out other versions. They can all kind of coexist, as happens with Shakespeare. I think this reminds me a lot of, recent Shakespeare adaptations, where it's not doing anything so sacrilegious as setting it in a high school or something like that, but it's bringing it into, another generation. All right, Ray, you've been patiently waiting with your hand up. Do you remember still what you wanted to tell us?
Yes,
Ray
thanks very much. I wanted to say that as much as I enjoy the book and French literature, and I've read the book in both English and in French, I think I respond to a movie giving it the benefit of the doubt as a separate work of art. And I recognize that it ought not to be just a film of the book. And it's just a different experience. So yes, a lot of Edmond's reactions to the Abbé in the Chateau d'If, that would make it very, very talky in a movie to be talking about a lot of that philosophizing. And I think they got that sort of thing across in a very effective way. And I think the transformation of Edmond from an innocent to this avenging angel kind of a thing was just really consistent with the theme of the book. That was well done, but it was it was a film. As a work of art, I think it worked extremely well with the power of the story, but made a good movie. It wasn't just a filmed book, which I think in some of these classics of literature, that is a risk. And the other thing I wanted to call out, especially to you, is I thought the cinematography and call them the production values of this film were just spectacular. It was so lovely to see meticulous costuming, and for all of the Mission Impossible elements of his chateau and everything. They really worked hard to give you this feeling of early 19th century milieu, and I appreciated that.
Yeah, thank you. And let's see, Anthony, do you want to add on?
Yes, hi, I jump in. So I'm on the side where I hadn't read any books, I hadn't seen any films, and frankly, I didn't know the story. So I just viewed it as a standalone film, and I found it very compelling. I very much enjoyed it. There are several things I enjoyed. One was minor characters were well fleshed out. I often in films, the film's about two characters and everybody else is window dressing. And I felt here the minor characters, many of them only had one scene, were excellent. I found some of the scenes in the film very compelling. The hanging scene, where protagonist is brought into jail, it just grabbed me, right? You're arrested and these people are all dead. I also found the prison
Hmm.
scenes to be very compelling. I hadn't really thought about scenes like that before. So again, for me, I very much like the film, but it's more of a standalone film for me, and it's not part of a great literature tradition.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm really appreciating hearing these different reactions because we have, obviously, two very different extremes, in terms of people who know the material inside out and are kind of looking with that kind of fidelity in mind. How faithful is it? Are the changes acceptable, worthwhile? And those who, it sounds like a lot of you who don't know the story really responded to it, and I think that's probably the primary audience that the filmmakers had in mind, while knowing that they were touching one of the, I don't know if Bible is quite the right word, but certainly one of the kind of sacred texts of French literature. And so the I love hearing though that those of you who are discovering the story through this movie, were connecting with it. It sounds like, I mean, you're dealing with, God, how many pages is this book? I guess it depends on the edition, but 1,000. There's a lot of material that has to be kind of compressed or just left out. And Anthony, your comment about the just the sheer number of characters and the way that, like, Angèle, for instance, is like very impactful in her few scenes, and the way that they're able to kind of, I think it's less about people having one scene and like they'll be set up, and then when they come back, it really hits you the way that they are used. Like someone who was a side character in the betrayal can play a role later on, for instance. Jeanette, you've got another thought for us.
Yes. This is just kind of a passing comment that I wanted to make. I said that I was disappointed by the film because I think I went into watching it with those heightened expectations. I was looking forward to it and knew something about the story, and I had read that it had been a blockbuster in France. And it's funny that it's seen as being in competition really with Emilia Perez, because
Emilia
that
Perez,
film,
yeah.
yes, I went into watching that one with knowing very little about it and expecting it to be more of, well, I didn't know it was a musical, so I went into that one with very low, I guess, expectations or no expectations and was blown away by it. And this one I went into with the higher expectations and so was somewhat disappointed. But I completely agree that the production values were great and the cinematography was very well done, very striking. But I just wanted to touch on something you said earlier about the film drawing in younger people and getting them interested in Dumas and in the novel. And I think you're absolutely right that the disguises that he uses uh, is you can see it almost as a intertextual reference to other superhero films and other films like Batman. He makes me think of Batman, really, if you talk about superheroes, because he's this somewhat dark, like Batman, at times. Justicier, he's bringing justice. He's not just giving revenge, he's seeing it as bringing justice for the crimes of these other people. And I was thinking, I don't know that I necessarily see the younger generation reading the novel and really enjoying it so much as I can imagine very easily the graphic novels that are going to be made of the story, because it really lends itself to that, both in terms of the action and the visual aspect. And that was it.
Sure, sure. It might be worth going down the line of the kind of like the just technique or the production value of it all, because this is really not a film that I am used to seeing come out of France, and that to me was half the excitement of watching this film. Yes, the story is compelling, but the idea that in a way the French film industry is almost stepping up to do something that I think that Hollywood is kind of abdicating. It's like and that while Hollywood goes through this thing of kind of plundering all of the IP that America has to offer, which it often finds in board games and comic books and kind of lesser sources. I think it's like we're getting a Candyland movie or from Disneyland or something turned into franchises. It's kind of exciting to think that France, which has in its patrimoine and it's very kind of like in the wealth of culture that the country has produced, these things that the question is being asked: could this make a good movie, or could it make a miniseries, or could it and there seems to be a moment, a surprising one, because the Three Musketeers movies were basically being made during the pandemic at a time when nobody knew if there would be movie theaters to go back to or something. And those movies did all right. I mean, they did pretty well. It's like great money for by French box office standards, but not necessarily enough, I think, to break even. So there was, Pathé, the studio that produced them, kind of following up with another gamble with this movie. And I love that it's been successful, because just because French audiences like big, flashy Hollywood movies does not mean they want to go see the kind of lower budget attempt to recreate that at home. And I'm incredibly impressed with how well they kind of pulled that off here. I mean, it really looks like $100 million, even if it's not at that scale. And and it's kind of fun to see kind of the way that you've got some David Lean in there. You've got much more modern influences. Like by the time you have the kind of kiss at the end, it looks like Joe Wright's Sense and Sensibility with the sun over the characters' heads and stuff like that, and handheld camera work. It's so that they're these are directors whose I think previous movie was basically like a domestic kind of interpersonal drama, stepping up to something that looks like, I don't know, the French Ridley Scott or something like that. It feels like it kind of borrows from that. But does anybody else have some thoughts on the look of it? And would you want to see France make more movies like this, or does it feel like let the Americans do that with their endless budgets, and France should stick to what it's good at, or something like that? Patricia, go ahead.
Maybe I'm the only one who felt this way, but the beginning of the film, I thought I was going to be disappointed, because the first scene when he dives into the water and he's saving Angèle, I thought was very, what do I know, amateurish. The way the boat was burning, the way the level of the sea level and the water and the background seemed like it was done in a studio, and they put everything together in a tub or something, and they're busy floating around. And yet when we got to the
I know what you mean. It looks a little like the Disney Little Mermaid movie or something.
Yeah, I mean,
or like in this kind of, it has to win us over. Yeah.
What did I get myself into? I'm not going to like this. This is going to be very sort of, and then afterwards, it became very opulent and rich and the shadowing that was done, and the different takes that were done with length of hallway and the coloring and so on, and the lighting, I thought was very well done as it progressed. But that first part, the very, I know, like I said, maybe I'm the only one, but the first scene, I thought, oh no, what is this? Because I thought it was very amateurish, personally.
No, I think you're right, and so I'm kind of impressed that that they were able to pull it off, because there are these kind of limitations. Maybe why don't you mute, Patricia, because I think I'm hearing an echo. But there are a couple shots. For instance, the one where he discovers the treasure and he drops the torch, and it falls through the floor, and then you get one shot of kind of like a CG shot of the treasure being illuminated, and then it's on to the next thing, and it's like, it makes me realize, like, that's probably the very most that their budget could do. They had however many $1,000s for that shot, and that's what we get. And so it's like, it's almost like, what I love about it is that it's like good enough, you know, to like compete alongside. I think you can put this movie side by side with, you know, kind of like, I don't know, it was I think it was Kevin Reynolds who did the previous Count of Monte Cristo in the States. He's the same, you know, director who made the Robin Hood Prince of Thieves movie with, you know, Kevin Costner. I mean, it's like you can put it side by side with a movie by someone like him, working with a Hollywood budget, and you know, it's kind of it kind of works. There are other like little short or like things where they've cut corners, I guess is what I'd say. Like, you know, there's a very key plot point that's going on about the trick that he plays with the ships disappearing and not, and you know, like and we get just like a couple shots of, you know, the kind of his collaborator in that rushing with a bunch of people towards some digital ships, and then that's it. You know, it's like our imagination has to fill in the rest. And if you haven't read the books, you might be left being like, what exactly is going on in the sequence? But it's kind of good enough. You know, it's like, I love that, you know, like that a French movie was able to kind of get this far, even if I acknowledge what you're saying too, Patricia, that like, you know, there are certain elements where I'm kind of like, yeah, it could be better, but I can't remember seeing a French movie kind of do this. Mira, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to add in response to your prompt about this type of film in the context of French cinema. Not that I'm any expert, but in my personal experience as a massive cinephile, I say bravo that this, like, they are approaching this sort of this big blockbuster, swashbuckling, fun type of genre, but they're using their own stories. You know, before I would have categorized French film, again, in my mind, as sort of, you've got the art house stuff that sort of doesn't, there's not much of a narrative arc and it's very cerebral. And you've got the very physical comedy stuff. Like you've got the really physical kind of comedic slap.
Like farce.
Yeah.
They do a lot of farce. Yeah.
Right. That. And now, just like, you know, I guess it's China, I'm going to say East Asia, South Asia, people are able to use their, you know, the stories from their cultures and do a big story that is appealing to broad audiences. And this was so much fun, and I think they're doing great. And I say, I'll take more.
No, that's a great comparison, actually, because like China is doing a version of this, which is they're going back to, I mean, they've got the legends that go back 1,000 or more years, and they're drawing from that for, you know, movies that are as kind of like technically polished as a Pixar film, say, but maybe not. They may not translate so much to the West, but you know, they have it's that, you know, that patrimoine that I was talking about. I mean, like the French culture has these stories, and the kind of shame of it all is that whenever they've been told, it's almost always been by Hollywood, with Americans speaking, you know, English. So it's like, it's kind of interesting to see what the French take might be. And it's surprising, I think, to see that the French take is actually much more Hollywood than I would expected. I can't see you, so I hope you hear me calling on you. If you
We do. We hear you now.
unmute, you're welcome to share your thoughts.
Oh, hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Oh, great, good.
Okay, yeah, sorry, it was breaking for a second. So yeah, no, I love the movie. I have not read the book, but I really just
Yes, go ahead.
enjoyed how I enjoyed how in depth they went in explaining the story and the scenery. I thought it was really well done. And I definitely want more. I second everyone's opinion in doing more. Maybe there is a sequel or maybe a movie that kind of looks back at all these different sections in more detail, but we definitely want more. And just as a confession, I thought I would say this in French, but I think I'll torture you guys. So I won't even try, but thank you for putting this together.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for your thought. Those of you who were with us a couple months ago watched Lost Illusions, which is another, kind of literary adaptation done with a sizable budget and a great cast. Peter Debruge makes an appearance in that one. And if you weren't here for that session, you might be interested to circle back and take a look at that movie. It's more grown up, I would say, in its themes and its kind of treatment of the material. It resonates with some contemporary things, but like if you look at that achievement and this as possibly the beginning of a new wave of France will keep making these as long as they're making money, and then when you have one colossal bomb, it may kill the whole enterprise. So like, let's see kind of how it works, but like, that's kind of the way the industry works. And so far it's been successful. That's why you have, the Dimitri Rassam, the producer of this movie, kind of charging forward with other options. But Clay, go ahead.
I turn on my audio. Actually, that
Yep, go ahead.
You pointed out one of the big differences between French movies and American movies. There is no translation, as much as I know, of the term le septième art in French. If someone says the seventh art, would you understand what that means in English? And I think since the cinema existed, the first actual cinema was in France, it has been considered an art. We have considered movies as a product that has to be publicized and sell. It's a little bit like soybeans or frozen pig bellies. It's a product, and usually in most reviews of a film in the United States, how many people saw it, what the box office amounted to, is usually in the first two paragraphs, and I think that's a major difference. And if you want to say maybe France is becoming American. After all, we had the French president today seeing the 45th and 47th president of the United States. And anyway, I'm sorry.
Well, I can play off a few things that you're raising. It's true that the American system is largely an industrial one, and I mean that's for very practical reasons. It's like we do not have subsidies for the arts, much less the septième art. And therefore, for a movie to exist in the States, it kind of has to earn its cost back and then some. And a movie like this one, and like The Three Musketeers, two-parter is so expensive that it's also part of that industrial, system. But France is quite unique in that there are, every television set you buy in France, a few euros are paid into a fund that sponsor first features by young auteurs or would-be auteurs, and you have a kind of an infrastructure that includes the Cannes Film Festival and various kind of subsidy bodies that make it possible for films that are more independent or artistic minded to exist. And I think that's one of the reasons we so respect French cinema, is because we often import and get to see those films. When Mira, commented about the kind of categories of French film she's familiar with, it's largely because only a fraction of what is made there is getting imported, and it's often the films that are winning prizes at film festivals or made by these artistic filmmakers. Those get released, but often it's a little different. Everything is changed now, where through streaming we can all kind of find those movies. But or if something like this one is a big enough hit popularly, then it might come out. So you've got movies with Jean Reno or certain movie stars who are familiar might find their way here. But it's interesting, I lived for a couple of years in Paris and was paying attention to the movies that open week in, week out, and they're a lot like American movies. It's like situation comedies, domestic dramas, policier, kind of cop movies, all these, all those same, kind of genres are being done in France and are often being done quite well. It's just, who in America is going to pay the whatever admission price, $15 to see, a subtitled version of a film on a fraction of the budget with stars they don't know. And I think we've started to see that change. But there is, a very industrial side to French cinema too, and this is kind of like the tippy top of it in terms of budget. If you live in France, you'll notice that the actor Laurent Lafitte, who plays the procureur in the film, is in like every movie, faces that you see over and over again as they appear. And Pierre Ninet, how many of you recognize Pierre Ninet? He played Yves Saint Laurent in the biopic about Yves Saint Laurent, and he's a familiar actor we see in kind of mainstream thrillers and things like that as well. I saw an interesting comment. Go ahead, Clay.
Agnès
Did you want to add something?
Yes. Also, one sees infrequently in French cinema.
They're. That's right. I mean, this is a starry cast. I saw a comment from Yvonne Kolodny. I hope I'm not butchering your name. That made me think that a good place to end would be the ending of the film. Because I think that we started this conversation, I think, correctly pointing out that the movie can't possibly do justice to the kind of like the depth of the themes of the movie. But I'm curious to sort of get your take on how it does end. Because it does kind of rush in its message, but it is not your typical happy ending. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The couple does not end up together in the traditional way. But does anyone want to share kind of like how they interpreted or responded to the way the film concludes? Yvonne, I welcome you to speak too, as you kind of raised the point. But any takers? Go ahead. I see someone with their hand up, but I don't see their name. If you just raised your hand, feel free to unmute. Go ahead.
I am very surprised, and I've read the book many times. I've seen many movies about Monte Cristo, and I thought this one was, the book is so complex with so many stories that this movie kept the spirit of the book. So you started with a very innocent young man in love, and then he gets his wealth and revenge. And then the last word of the book as well as the movie are what? Wait and hope. So you're speaking about the moral arc from innocence to knowledge of the wickedness of the world that called for revenge. And then at the end, he's lost his love. He realized that revenge has a very heavy price because of the loss of the young man. And in the book, different stories. And then his last word is attendre et espérer. And I thought it was very moving to see that well reflected in the movie as well as in the book.
Yeah, it's as Adele sort of pointed out that kind of great aphorism about revenge or resentment is kind of like drinking poison yourself. It's like there's this. I think maybe without all the nuances that the novel might offer, the kernel of that is conveyed. I also love that structurally this movie kind of begins with a going well for, I'm saying not the right word, but I mean, it's almost ludicrous, how great Dantes's life is kind of in the first act of the movie, and he's there at the altar, and then suddenly it's like, gets robbed from him. And it's almost like the thing you expect, English language fairy tales or stories to build to is where this begins, and then smash, and he has to kind of pick himself back up and learn a lot of life lessons over the course of the next, 15 years and 3 hours.
You're left wondering, after all that, Dantes is what, 40? What is he going to do with his life the rest of his life?
Sure, yeah.
And I think he's,
he's really...
go ahead.
Sorry, I missed the last part of your sentence. Do you think he's going to be...
And I think he's learned that revenge was probably a futile endeavor, and he needs to find something more important.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting how when one dedicates themselves to something like that, and let's say you achieve it or you learn otherwise, then what? That's a really ambiguous place, to leave someone. Would anyone else like to share a last thought before we kind of close out today? Yvonne, you brought up that that really interesting observation. Would you like to articulate anything on camera?
Well, yeah, I basically, it was like Adele said, it was so horrifying, absolutely horrifying to be pulled away and to be thrown into prison for 14 years. And then the scene where he finds his fellow prisoner. And then that is also, we think, well, it's very gripping. It's one of the most gripping parts of the whole movie as well. And then comes the revenge and the acting and the way he does it and everything, and we go through all these parts of the movie, and we enjoy it. We enjoy every single revenge, every single downfall, everything. And then comes the son into the picture, and Mercedes and the relationship. and then it becomes more human again, and you wonder, is that the right thing? But it was, I feel it was. But then at the end, I guess he should have reconciled with Mercedes, but in a way that's not realistic either. And so therefore the ending, I think, is correct, as much as we would have wanted a happy ending. And then here, I think that the French have it right. The French know how to not do a Hollywood happy ending like that all the time. They go for, well, it was Dumas, so he was French. I mean, we can say the French. He was an amazing French literature. So maybe that doesn't, he probably didn't think that he would make a movie once that you would compare, is it American or is it French, or how does this end or that end? When Dumas did that, he said it. So nobody can take credit for that. But that's,
well, it is interesting that, you know, even if we're left very uncertain where Dantes can go from here at the ending, you know, like, can you imagine if someone had, you know, the bad idea of trying to reunite him and Mercedes and have that be the conclusion? Where would they go from there? I mean, it would just be such a cop out, and, you know, like, it would leave so many uncertainties. So
yeah,
you're right. I think it has to go this way, and it really leaves audiences, I think young audiences, you know, who are used to maybe a different kind of payoff, with something to immediately discuss, you know, and to unpack. Well, I always love these conversations. I'm really delighted, you know, that we were able to look at this movie and at the turnout this month. Next month's movie is really a special one. It won the Venice Film Festival a few years ago, and you know, is just a gripping you know, drama. I hope to see you back next month. And if you can't make that one, just, you know, kind of keep track. We do these every month, and we're mixing it up with different titles. So thank you all, and we'll see you in March.
Thanks to you, Peter, and thanks as always to Renee Ketchum, Isabelle Leroux, and Melissa Sora with the Alliance Française. And thank you to everybody who joined us today, and for such a rich conversation about the Comte de Monte-Cristo and the challenges and joys and risks of adapting a beloved classic. It was fantastic to see so many new faces today, and I thought it might be a good moment to clarify something that may have been a source of confusion. So the way that this event works in general is that we announce a film, everyone watches it on their own, and then we all come together for a hosted conversation. Now, of course, it's fine to come to the event without having seen the film beforehand, but if you want to watch it before the discussion, you'll find the link to information about where the film is available in the announcement email from the Alliance Française, or you can always find it on the French Film and TV page on Telescope Film. So with that, we look forward to seeing you next month, and have a great evening.
Thank you all.